So thanks for having me out. First off, I haven't been to SecKC since I think it was 2018, 2019 was the last time I was here. So thank you for having me and having me up on stage. I have no ability to follow the talk that we just watched together. This is going to be incoherent, dumb rambling about nonsense. So just, tamper your expectations. I love you too. So who the hell am I? So I normally start out by saying by day. So by day, I'm the Vice President of Defensive Services at Coalfire. But by night, I do a bunch of other stuff. And that other stuff is that I run all the technical operations for the Black Hat security briefings, and I've been doing that for 23 years. I'm also one of the main organizers of DEF CON, the largest hacker convention in the world, and hopefully you're all familiar with DEF CON. I started and still participate in the RSA conference SOC as well. I've written some books. I speak at conferences all around the world, and that might sound braggadocious, but that's not the point of it. Those are the things that make my mama proud, right? Like she's like, my baby, and that's great. But what it actually says is that I love security. I have always loved security. It has been part of my life since I was just a wee child, and I assume that I will continue to love it. So when I talked to Bill and he said, oh, you should come out SecKC, you should speak. And I was like, what do you want me to speak on? And he's like, whatever you want. And I was like, yeah, but what? And he's like, well, you just did Darknet Diaries. Just talk about some of that stuff. And I'm like, but they probably listened to it. And he was like, yeah, just do it anyway. And I was like, all right, fine. So you're getting the live show. So the first half, I'll talk a little bit about me, how I got into the industry, my involvement with Black Hat and DEF CON. And then the latter half will be me talking about actually the Black Hat NOC, like I said, which I've been running for over 20 years, and how that came about. So let's get into it. So also, I use ChatGPT to make a bunch of images, and come at me. I don't give a shit if you're angry about the water. I'm from Utah, where we have the Bluffdale NSA data center that uses 10.7 million gallons of water a month to listen to our phone calls. So if I want to make an adorable picture of me as a child, I'll fucking do it. So, adorable. So that's me. That's me. How did I get started, or why do I even have the name Grifter? Well, when I was a kid, like many of the nerds that are in this audience, I used to read the dictionary. I just liked reading the dictionary. I liked looking for cool words. That's my dog right there. I looked for cool words, and the word that I came across with Grifter, or the definition that I saw, it said, a person at a circus or carnival who runs freak shows or games of chance. And then the second one just said, commonly a con artist. And my 8-year-old brain was like, that's dope. And so I assumed that as my name for things like video games, right? Part of the Nintendo generation. So decided that's going to be my name, put it in on video games, and eventually when I moved into the online world, I started using it there as well. It is my name as much as Bill called me Neil. It is probably more my name than Neil is my name. More people in the world know me as Grifter. My girlfriend calls me Grifter. She refuses to call me Neil. She's just talking to her mom, she'll be like, can you stop calling him Neil? Just call him Grifter. It's weird for me. So I am Grifter. I started out getting on pirate bulletin board systems when I was a kid. My uncle was in tech, and this is the late 80s, so not everybody had a computer in their home. My parents got divorced when I was quite young, and my dad lived with his brother. I have ADHD, and quite severe, and in order to keep me still, he would just sit me in front of the computer, and that was the thing that drew my focus. And so as part of that Nintendo generation, I love video games, and he was like, we'll dial up this bulletin board system. You can go on here and you can download games, these different games that you want. And I would take like a printout of the different titles and say, how long will this take me to download, right? And he'd like, see this number next to it? That's how many bytes it is. And then the transfer speed is this much, so that will take probably 6 hours. So that will take a day or whatever it is. 300 baud, baby. Yeah. So that's how I learned about, networking or file systems and things like that. Were just, how can I get this game? How long will it take me? It was a very selfish way of getting started. But what I loved about those BBSs at the time was that no one knew how old I was, right? They just knew me based on the content of my posts. They didn't know they were talking to a 9, 10-year-old, 11-year-old. Eventually, someone on the bulletin board said, hey, based on your posts and stuff, I think you'd like this other BBS. And they gave me a number, and when I dialed up that number, it was a hacker bulletin board system, and the rest is history, right? I loved it. I read every file that was on there. I was tripping out. Like, I was like, this is amazing. I even read the conspiracy stuff. Like, it was like, the government is working with the aliens to do this and this and this, and I was like, they are! Like, I was like, it was so good. For those of you who remember those days, it was like, how to make a bomb, how to break into a computer, aliens are among us, right? So it was good times. But I spent so much time just reading everything I could possibly find, learning about operating systems that in some cases I never touched, right? And the command structure and then the file systems. And in some cases, just reading programs, reading source code, and never actually getting it to work because I didn't have access to the systems to make them work. But it helped me learn. I became obsessed with it, right? So much so that I would go to school and I would get into a fight so that they would suspend me so I could go home and read books about computers, right? Eventually they caught on. They were like, he gets in a fight every other week. And it's like, yeah, because I don't want to be here because you're not teaching me the things that I want to learn. But I didn't have access to a computer all the time. I only had it on the weekend when I'd go to my dad's house. So where did I spend my time? On the phone system. So I like this because ChatGPT, if you notice the image on the right, gave me three hands. Yeah. But yeah, so 9X was my stomping ground of choice, the New York, New England exchange. And if you've watched movies like Hackers where they're, in the back of a van trying to grab a bunch of manuals and stuff like that, and, serial killer comes out and he's got the hard hat on and a butt set and all the whatever, that's not fiction. Like, we did that. We jumped over fences, we ran into, the back of a van when it was parked somewhere, we stole some shit, and then we ran away, right? But I thought about I still have the manual I stole out of the back of a van. I still have the hard hat, and eventually I did buy a 9X payphone. I had spent years trying to collect the parts of one so I could build it myself, since it hasn't been 9X for a very long time. And then one day on eBay for $400, a full, beautiful 9X payphone was for sale. And of course I snatched it up, and it was in perfect condition. And I asked the guy, where did you get this? And he's like, oh, it was decommissioned from an office building in Brooklyn, and it's been sitting in a warehouse for the last 20 years. And I was like, it is my sweet baby. I love it so much. And I got it home, and I hooked it up, and then I dropped a quarter in it, and it went beep, 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 beep. And any of the old phone freaks know that 1700, 2200 hertz or kilohertz tone mix, that is the sound of a quarter dropping into a payphone. I genuinely teared up when that sound came out of the phone. I didn't expect it was going to do it, and I was really, really happy. So I spent a lot of time exploring the phone system, trying to, get free phone calls, talk to people in different parts of the world on things like the 2600 voice bulletin board. DEF CON had a voice bridge you could get on and do all kinds of things, right? Just voicemail boxes where you'd trade login information or credit card numbers or different things for whatever. Like, they had conference bridges we'd get on and just do prank phone calls. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'd be up with friends, like on a party line, making prank phone calls. And I don't know, it was the 90s. We loved that shit. like Jerky Boys. Do you guys remember Jerky Boys? Yeah. All right. So yeah, we love prank phone calls. We get on there and do that. And a quick side story there was I used to sell T-shirts at DEF CON. I'd sell them in the vendor area, and my ex-wife was selling the shirts, and I just happened to stop by, and I was sitting behind the table, and a guy came up and he said, like, whose shirt is this? Like, who made this? Like, why are you selling this? And she's like, oh, these are Grifter shirts. And he was like, Grifter? And he was like, where's he from? And she's like, oh, Utah. And he's like, oh, okay, not the same guy. And she's like, but he grew up in New York. And he's like, he grew up in New York. And he's like, wait, Grifter. And I was like, what's up, man? Like, as I was sitting back there, I was like, what's up? And he was like, I'm Blue Knight. And I was like, what? And we lost our minds. And we used to hang out on these, like, bridges together when we were 14 years old. And now, 12, 13 years later, we're meeting up at DEF CON for the first time. And it's like, that's what you look like? That's what you look like, right? So anyway, yeah, that for a lot of us who didn't have access to a computer at the time, the phone system is where we played. I know several friends who went on to work, for phone companies, which is interesting because that seems to be the way it goes, right? We start out playing, using those systems as our playground, and then now we're the people who are defending them against, other versions of us. But it's that's the, I don't know, that's the love, is that finally you get access to the system that you coveted for so long. So I had a bit of a misspent youth. I grew up in a really poor area, part of Long Island on the South Shore. And I would say my initial time breaking into stuff was about exploration. It was about learning. It was about trying to figure out how things worked. But for me, it was also another thing. And I talked about this as well on the podcast, but for me, my way of traveling, like growing up super poor, I thought, well, I'm never gonna get to go other places, right? Like I'm here, I'm stuck here. It was the kind of town where people just grew up, you lived and died there, right? It wasn't, there wasn't an escape. So I thought, oh, I would love to go to Rome, so how do I go to Rome? Well, I'll just break into a computer there, right? So I'd go and try to find systems that were in different geographical areas or run by governments from the countries that I wanted to go to. And in my childhood brain, I figured, okay, well, if I do that, if I access that system, that means that the network, like the modem on that computer is flashing, the hard drive is spinning up, which means that I'm introducing light and heat into a geographic area that I'll never get to go to, right? So I can reach out and touch, physically affect that space, even if it's in a broom closet somewhere. For me, that's how I explored the world, and so that's what I did. So it was very much about exploration until it wasn't. I wasn't a good kid. I did a lot of physical crime, and it turned out that knowing how to use a computer meant that I could do other crime as well. If you want to hear details on it, you can go listen to episode 157 of Darknet Diaries, but I'll just quickly say, I basically did a lot of financial crime, like identity theft, like what we called carding at the time, but just, getting different credit cards, ordering things to abandoned houses so I could just later sell them, or eventually it led to me being able to obtain valid credit cards that I then sold to the mob. So, yeah. So if there's any the kids who are in the audience, if you want to get good, do crime. Yeah. It was a different time. Yeah, no, now you don't have to do that. If we wanted to learn a system, we had to go break into it. We had to break into the university that had those types of computers, or the government agency that did. Now you can just fire up a couple of VMs. We didn't have that option, so we just did it, right? And so don't do crime, do crime. Anyway, yeah, like I said, for more details, like go listen to the podcast. But I eventually did escape New York, and I escaped it in the way a lot of poor kids that come from less fortunate upbringing do, and that's by joining the military, right? Like our military is full of people with the same story that I have, which is I don't have another way out, and if I stay here, I'm gonna die, or I'm gonna end up in prison, so I'll just go into the military. So I went to the Air Force. Yeah, that's right, hoorah! So I went into the Air Force. I did my 4 years doing F-16, F-117 avionics. So we talked about the electronic countermeasures earlier. That was my baby. So yeah, I did that for a while. But one of the first things I did when I went into the military is I bought a computer. Right, as soon as I got to my permanent duty station, which is Hill Air Force Base, Utah. It's how I ended up out there. I went and signed up for a membership for the NCO Club, which is basically the on-base club. It's like where all the wives go once their husbands deploy to go meet the people who didn't. And so they were like, when you're signing up for a membership, they're like, would you also like to apply for a credit card? And I'm like, sure. I checked the box. And then they're like, you're approved for next to nothing. But it was enough money for me to go buy a computer, so I did that. I bought a computer with the little line of credit that I maxed out that card, and then immediately started breaking into shit again from an Air Force base. And I did that for probably, I don't know, like 7 or 8 months. And as I was doing it, I kept getting deeper and deeper. And I was spending like the hours that I wasn't at work on the flight line, working on the jets, like back in my dorm room, just throwing everything at everything, writing, malware, stealing tons of, stay with me, AOL accounts and trading them for different stuff, right? I used to have them like send, it was like, you'd go in and be like, oh, do you want to know what private, like it's just phishing basically, like do you want to know there's private chat rooms on AOL, and if you run this tool, we're doing a beta test right now, and you'll be able to see who's in those private chats, and everybody's like, I gotta know, and so they'd run your malware, and then you'd get all their account credentials sent to a Juno account is where I sent them. Remember Juno? Right, so I did that, and I was doing that for like 7 or 8 months, and then I was like, you're gonna go to federal prison. So I sold that computer to the guy who lived in the dorm below me, and I didn't touch a computer again for probably about 2 years, because I was just like, don't go to federal prison. It's also, I avoided going to DEF CON at the time. I avoided basically all contact with the hacker community while I was in. And I was 17, 18, 19 years old while this was going on. But as I was about to get out, when I was about to separate, I was like, I only know how to do 2 things, right? I know how to fix an F-16 or break into computers. And I knew I didn't want to work on F-16s, right? So I was like, yeah, I don't want these. Jets are pigs. Like if you had a car that broke every time you drove it, that's a fighter jet. That's all of our fighter jets. You think the F-35 is better? It's not, okay? Pilots take it out, they go, whee! And you're like, sir, that breaks things, right? And so then they come back and they're like, I broke it, person who has a high school diploma. And you're like, okay, person with a college degree, I'll fix that for you. And so then we'd fix it, we send them back out. But I knew I didn't want that to be my life. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna just go back to breaking into stuff, but this time I'll do it like for a living. I'll let the company know I'm coming. And so I started going to the local security meetups. Sorry, 1 second, there's a camera. Okay, yeah, so, what would Dual D do? No clothes are coming off of here. with this amount of light, it would reflect immediately back at you. You'd all be blinded. I am an avid indoorsman. I don't let the sun touch me. Like, people are like, dude, how are you 46 years old? And I'm like, I moisturize every day, and I don't let the sun touch me. That's it. So anyway, so I was like, time to get back in contact with the hacker community if this is what I'm going to make my career. So I started going to the local 2600 meetings in Salt Lake, and eventually the crew that was there said, we're going to DEF CON. And I'd known about DEF CON from the start of DEF CON, but I couldn't afford to go, and my parents were never going to let me get on a plane from New York and fly to Vegas anyway. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And we road tripped to DEF CON, and that was a great time. We put together like a wireless network that we, from vehicle to vehicle, like an ad hoc wireless network, and then we set up an IRC server and we chatted to each other from car to car. Like, we were like, what up? Like, it was the dumbest shit ever, but it was great, right? That is the spirit of, like, you know, hackers and DEF CON, and yeah. My first DEF CON was DEF CON 8, so yeah, this year is DEF CON 33, so we are old, we are old. But yeah, so we headed off, and we went to DEF CON. And I knew from the time that I first experienced DEF CON that I would go to DEF CON every year for the rest of my days. I was like, these are my people. You hear people often describe the hacker community as a family. I genuinely felt like that. I still feel that way now. And I know people say it's a cliche or it's all whatever. False. Some of the people who I have met through DEF CON, some of whom are in this room. I love you, Bill. I do consider family. They're closer to me than some of my actual family, right? So the hacker community is the family that I chose, and they chose me in return. And so I knew, I was like, year after year, I'm going to head back to this ridiculous conference. And it let me meet people who inspired me to be better, right? To learn more things. And I've been very lucky that with my involvement in DEF CON and Black Hat, that I've got to sit in a room and listen to the experts, the smartest people in the industry, get up on stage and talk about the cool things that they're doing. And while I'm sitting there and the stuff is just making a rushing sound over my head because I don't know what the hell the speaker is talking about, I'm like, timed up your game, bitch, right? Like, I'm like, I gotta buy a book. I don't know half of the words he just said. So that's the thing that you can take away from going to a conference where even if you don't understand what it is that the person's talking about, that's not them trying to make you feel dumb. That's them asking you to level up your game. So if you didn't understand something that Joe was talking about, then level up. If you go and go to a conference and you're like, I just don't get it, level up. Buy the book, read it, spend some time online, figure it out. If I went to a conference and I heard somebody say a word or use a term or talk about a technology that I didn't know and I heard it 2 or 3 times, then I'm like, you absolutely have to learn that. So leveling up means like staying curious, right? You've got to tell yourself, like, I'm not done. You don't reach a certain point and go, well, I know enough. Like, you never know enough. Just keep growing. I used to compete in a contest that a guy named Lost, if any of you are familiar with Lost, yeah. Lost used to put on a contest called the Mystery Challenge. So the Mystery Challenge is, in my mind, it was one of the purest hacker contests that existed. And it's because it had every aspect of the hacker culture in it. You had to read schematics and put together circuits. So you had your, electronics aspect of it. You had to pick locks. There was phone freaking stuff built into it. It was crypto and puzzles and codes and different things. And I absolutely loved it. It was wild. But there was a year, the first year I competed in it, actually Joe Grand, who came out and talked to you guys last month. Joe and I were on a team together with a couple other folks, and we took 3rd place because we overthought the last problem of the challenge. And I was like, man, I love this thing. We should do it again next year. And then when the next year came around, I had learned some things I hadn't the previous year, and I did really well in the challenge. I'd gotten to a point where I was pretty far ahead of the other teams and the couple of guys that I was working with. But we were stuck because we hit a point where he handed us this box and it was covered in locks, and I couldn't pick locks. I didn't know how to pick locks at the time. And I was like, shit, well, now what? And so I traded some information to another team so that they could pick the locks that were on this box for me. And I was like, it's fine. It'll work out in the end. And then they tried to pick the locks, and they spent a couple hours on it. Like, we're in the middle of the night where, like, we've got this box because you couldn't tip it over. Like, it was really, they had, like, an accelerometer in it. If you moved it too much, it would yell at you, and it was like, you tilted this 3 times, 2 more, and it will lock. Like, you're like, damn it. But they couldn't get the locks off. And so I gave them information, and in the end, they took a grinder and cut the locks off of it. And I'm like, I could have done that, right? Like, I could have done that. But in the end, at the end of the conference, I did win. So I won. I came in first place with my team. Woo, yay, woo. And we got a black badge. If you're not familiar with the black badge, if you win a contest of significant difficulty at DEF CON, you get a black badge. It means you get entry to DEF CON for life. So I got a black badge, but it was tainted, right? Because I was mad at myself for not knowing something. So I was like, I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to get in a position where I have to trade information to another team to get them to do something for a skill that I don't have that's not happening. So I went home. I ordered a bunch of stuff online. I spent about $400 on lock picks, and then I went and bought basically every lock at Home Depot. And I spent the next year sitting on my couch watching TV picking locks. And when the next year came around and we competed in the mystery challenge, we got to the point where we got the box, and we put it down, and there were 3 locks on it, and I went, boom, boom, boom. I mean, literally, it took probably, I would say, a minute to get all 3 of the locks off. And I was like, yeah, and I was like, that's right, bitch. Right, and the guys on my team were like, oh my gosh, and I'm like, I have spent a year preparing for this. They're like, holy shit, dude. But it made me level up, right? It made me learn a skill that I didn't have, and it's become an incredibly, incredibly useful skill. If you can't pick locks, go learn to pick locks. It's not that hard. They are just puzzles. They're in the back, apparently. So go and learn how to pick a lock. It works out pretty well. When my youngest child, who is 11 now, was about 1.5, 2, he locked himself in the car when we were on a camping trip, and we were in the middle of nowhere, literally an hour into the wilderness. And my ex-wife came in, and she woke me up, and she was like, do you have your lock picks? I'm like, that is a silly question. Of course I do. Because they are in my pocket right now. And I was like, why? And she's like, Colton locked himself in the car. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And I was able to unlock the car and get him out of the car without having to smash the window, which was her initial reaction. She was like, we're gonna have to throw a log through the windshield. And I'm like, we're gonna scar this child for life. Give me a few minutes, right? And it took a couple of minutes, but I got him out of the car, right? So we won the contest again the next year. Then it started making people mad. And here's another lesson in here. Sometimes people will be mad at you for your success. Fuck those people. So people started to say things like, oh, Grifter's cheating, he's not doing the challenges himself, well, it's the other people on his team. Haters gonna hate. And so I was like, you know what? I don't need the hate. I'm not going to do the contest again next year. I said to myself, it's all right. I've got 2 black badges. I have nothing to prove to anybody. And then Lost showed up at Black Hat, and he was like, hey, we did the pre-quals, and you didn't enter. And I was like, yeah, I'm not playing this year. He's like, no. Like, I made challenges specifically to fuck with you. And I was like, well, I'm tired of the hate, and people say this and blah, blah, blah. And he spent probably 2.5 days like working on me, please play the challenge, please do the challenge. I'm like, I didn't do the pre-quals. He's like, I saved a team slot for you. I have a slot for you if you want to do it. And you were supposed to have a team of 5 or more players. And I was like, fine, I'll do it if I can compete alone. And he was like, done. And I was like, all right. And then I won again. That's right. The second place team had 16 people on it. Fuck those guys. Right, actually, no, I love those guys. They're friends. I actually met really cool people competing in the contest, and I do love them and spend a lot of time hanging out with them. At the time, they hated me, but sometimes friendships are born of hatred. So even if somebody is telling you like they're getting mad at you for your success, just keep going. It's not about them. It's not about how they feel about you. It's about how you feel about you. It's about how the skills that you develop and what you can do with them later, whether that means winning a contest at DEF CON so you can get free entry for life or getting your kid out of the car. So, all right. Another thing, the gospel according to Grifter. One of the things, when Bill said to me, like, hey, come talk, he's like, tell the youngins, like, how to, get ahead in their careers or how to start out or whatever. And for me, one of the things I've always done is just said yes, and then I figure it out later, right? So when somebody comes and says, hey, do you want to do this thing? And I'm like, I have no idea how to do that. I just go, yeah, sure. Yeah, I can do that. Why not? Right? Yeah, speak at SecKC. What do you want me to talk about? Fuck it, we'll do it live. And so yeah, I've always just said, yeah, sure, why not? Let's do it. Okay. At one time, it was a friend saying to me, we should try to speak at DEF CON, right? This was going into DEF CON 10, and I was like, I don't speak in public. That sounds horrifying. Sure, why not? We'll figure it out later. The only on-stage experience I had had up to that point was in high school. I competed in an electronics challenge thing that took us to state. I was on the top 3 teams so we had to do our challenges up on stage in front of thousands of other kids from high schools all over New York. And when it was time to get up on that stage, I went into the bathroom and vomited, right? And then it was, want to speak at DEF CON? Sure, maybe this time I'll shit myself. But I did it, right? I was just like, fine, I'll do it. And again, it's just about going, yeah, why not? Sure, what could possibly go wrong? Even if it goes completely sideways, in the moment, it might suck, but it's gonna make for a hell of a classic anecdote later. So just do it, Fall flat on your freaking face if that's what it takes, but just say, sure, I'll try, why not? Another way that I did that was kind of accidental. I am what I term a high-functioning introvert. This is not my natural habitat. My natural habitat is home, like in front of a screen, chilling, right? I said I'm an avid indoorsman. I'm not big on like going to big events or social things, but you do have to kind of get out of your shell sometimes. So even if something's not making you uncomfortable, then you're not pushing yourself, right? So at an early Black Hat show, we'd done the show for the day. There was what they called the gala reception at night. It meant that there was going to be drinks and people standing around talking about stuff, and I was just tired. I didn't want to go, but I forced I literally have like conversations with myself, like internal battles where I'm like, go downstairs. I'm like, go downstairs. But I don't want to. Go downstairs. I'd really rather not. Go downstairs. And so I did. And I happened to walk into where the event was being held, which was just in a bar in the hotel. And I walked into the doors, and as I'm walking, I hear a couple of guys talking about a book that I had recently read, a cybersecurity book, which none of us called it at the time, not cybersecurity. We remember how much we hated when like the government adopted the word cyber, and we were like, God, forget, yeah, it was like, damn it. So it was a cybersecurity book, and I, as I was walking by, I heard it, and I just turned, and I was like, that book sucks. Really good at the social stuff, Grifter. And I was like, oh, that book sucks. And the guy was like, why does it suck? And we talked about it, and then he was like, oh, have you read this? And I was like, yeah, I read that one. That one's good. Well, what makes that one good and that one suck? Well, the structure of this and blah, blah, blah. And he's talking about technologies that we're probably going to see for the next 5 years, where the other guy was talking about blah, blah, blah. And we talked for like 45 minutes, and I was just shredding all these other books because, again, no social graces. And then I was like, well, I should probably go wander around and talk to other people. It was really nice talking to you guys. And one of the guys goes, yeah, man, it was really great talking to you. Let me give you my card. Keep in touch. And he hands me his card, and I look at it, and it says, Andrew Williams, Vice President, Singris Publishing, which means that I had just ripped apart the books of this publishing company to the man who ran the security division. And I was like, oh, and he was like, oh, and so then he said, look, man, I really appreciate the candid feedback. Would it be cool if you send me your address? I'll send you, anytime we get a new security book out, I'll send it to you. You tell me what you think about it. Give me your honest opinion. I really need that kind of feedback. Absolutely, let's do that. A couple of weeks later, a couple boxes show up at my house. It's every security book that publisher's ever published. And then as new books came out, I'd get an envelope in the mail with a book in it, and I'd read the book, and I'd tell him, like, that one sucked, this one was good, here's what I felt was missing, blah, blah, blah. If you ever do a second edition, da-da-da-da. And then he'd start asking me, well, what do you think we should be publishing? What's missing? What's missing from our library? What technologies am I not looking at? And I'd be like, well, you should talk about this, or you should do this. Because again, sitting in a conference going, I don't understand this. And if I don't understand it and the book doesn't exist, you should write that book. And he'd go find somebody, and 9 months later, the book would come out. And that was cool. I felt like I was having an impact on like what was ending up on the shelves at Barnes & Noble. And I was like, that's kind of cool. And then one day I went to him and said, oh, you should do a book like this. And it was about like strike back techniques, which is basically, if you're getting hacked, eventually you get tired of getting poked in the chest and you go, come at me, right? Which as a New Yorker felt natural to me. Like I was like, if somebody keeps poking you in the chest, knock their teeth out, right? Like, and so I was like, why can't we do that from a technological approach? And that book really pissed people off. But he said to me, yeah, you're right. That does sound like a good book. We should do that. And I said, we? And he was like, yeah, we. I've been sending you free books for a couple of years now. It's about time you make me some money. And I said, I don't know how to write a book. He's like, that's what we have editors for. He's like, so put together a group of friends that you want to write a book with, and we'll do it together, right? And so I did. So I wrote a book with Bruce Potter, who's a good friend, with Dan Kaminsky, with Chris Hurley, with Pyro, like, and we put this book out, and I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know, but I said yes, right? So say yes. You never know what kind of cool stuff's going to come out of it. So I said yes, right? So what else did I say yes to? When I was about, I think, 22, 23 years old, I was one of the administrators on the DEF CON forums with a guy named Nulltone, and I was bitching on the forums about how expensive Black Hat was. I was just like, it's too expensive. For somebody like me who at the time was self-employed, going out and doing red team stuff, pen testing, I was like, it's just too expensive. I can't drop a couple $1,000 plus travel or whatever. They should have some kind of student discount or a scholarship program or something like that. And another guy, Russ Rogers, just said, hey, I can introduce you to someone you can probably volunteer. So I ended up going out and volunteering at a Windows show for them. That was their show in Seattle. And it was great. Like, I had a great time. And they went off to go do their show in Amsterdam a couple months later. And I wasn't helping with the Amsterdam show, but I knew I was going to be out at the Vegas show to volunteer. So the person who handled the network stuff for them at the time, he gathered together all the network equipment, because at Black Hat we replace everything. We replace every router, every switch, every firewall, every access point with our own gear. We don't use the infrastructure of the venue that we're at. So this guy packed up all the gear, palleted it up, put it on the loading dock at the Black Hat office, and then they flew off to Amsterdam. The only problem is he never scheduled somebody to come pick up that gear. And so it stayed on the loading dock in Seattle, and they flew off to Amsterdam without any gear, right? So he didn't do that job anymore. And then Dark Tangent, Jeff Moss, called me up, and he was like, hey man, we really liked you, like, at the Windows show. Would you be interested in running the network for us? You can bring a team of people with you. You know, we'll pay you. Obviously, we'll pay for your flight, hotel, or whatever. And I was like, this keeps sounding better and better. Keep talking, right? And so I was like, great. And I went to two of my friends, and I said, hey, you guys want to go run the Black Hat network? Yes, I said two of my friends to run the network for Black Hat. And they were like, yeah, that sounds fun. And off we went to Vegas, and we ran the network for Black Hat that first US show. Now, this is the feedback I got from Jeff, was he said, look, man, the network is mostly there as a, like, it's fine if it's up or not. It's there for like email and stuff like that. Any of the training classes, they just bring their own on-site servers, and we run Cat5 all over the classroom to different switches and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, he's like, so it doesn't matter, just try to do the best that you can, you know, keeping it up, phrasing. And then we went, and the network did stay up the entire show except for 15 minutes. We used to use these old Cisco access points for the gray beards in the room. If you remember the ones that you'd stick the Orinoco gold cards in, and then you'd put the antenna in it and like tape it to a wall. Like, so we had those, and a Cisco 2600 router, and a couple of Linksys, like off-the-shelf, like commercial switches, and that's how we ran the network at Black Hat. And at one point, the network goes down, we get it back up, and I go around to the training classes. There were only 15 of them at the time. And I go around and say, like, hey, sorry about that outage, blah, 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 you know, and just checking on them. And before I could say anything, when I walked into one classroom, a guy went, hey, the network went out. And I was like, yeah, I apologize for that. We got it back up now or whatever. And he's like, that was me. And I was like, what? And he's like, we got a 0 day for those Cisco access points you got. And I demoed for the class. And I was like, thanks, Greg. It was Greg Hoagland, if any of you know Greg, and he took the network down, and otherwise it would have had 100% uptime. I'm not bitter or anything. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Settle down, right? So I really I enjoyed the experience, right? And so I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm going to bring more people next time. And like I said, at that show we had there's 1,500 attendees and 15 training classes. At the show we're approaching now for this year, I'm sure it will mirror what we had last year. The US show is 25,000 attendees and 96 training classes, right? So a little bit of growth, right? Phrasing again. And then, yeah, so the team of two has turned into this. So this is the team from this past show. So it is not something that it's like, oh, Grifter runs the Black Hat Knock. No. This is who runs the Black Hat Knock. It's an extensive crew of miscreants, riffraff. Bill, you know, you were on the team for several years. So they're like, let's go take a picture in front of the Black Hat logo. Why? Where is it? Yeah. But yeah, so this is the team, right? So now I'm going to talk about what it's like to run that network. So the Black Hat network is often billed as one of the most hostile networks in the world. And the way that I describe it to people is in that way. But what I say is, it is one of the most hostile networks in the world if you're looking at it just based on traffic alone. But the reality is, most of that bad traffic is good traffic. It just looks bad, right? It's the Jessica Rabbit of traffic. It's just drawn that way. So that's a training class happening, and somebody is doing a lab, and it looks like, oh, somebody's firing an exploit at some server on the internet, or somebody's doing this thing, or, oh, this computer in one classroom is attacking another computer, right? So it's somebody doing a demo up on stage, showing off a tool and research that they've been working on for the last 2 years, and now they've got their 45 minutes in the spotlight, and they're showing it off, and they're excited about it. And unfortunately, if we were to block that traffic, it would crush their. We would be the demo gods, smiting them, right? And we don't want to be that. So we have to let most of that go. So while the traffic does look incredibly hostile, it's a challenge to figure out what's hostile, what's the bad, and what's the good bad. And so where if you're on your network back at your organization, you are combing through all that data, I would characterize that as looking for a needle in a haystack, right? What's bad here? At Black Hat, we are looking for a needle in a needle stack. So it's an incredibly difficult challenge. It's why it takes a crew this big. It's why we have a ridiculous setup like this. So this is what the knock looks like when we're in Las Vegas. It is a fishbowl that allows people to come in and stare at us. And we only made that public a few years ago because Informa, the company that owns Black Hat, would come into the knock and they'd say, man, it's cool in here. Like, you have music playing, there's LED lights everywhere, there's a stuffed gorilla in the corner and an inflatable sheep. There's old hacker movies, like, projected up onto the wall, that kind of stuff. They're like, you should really let us show this off. And I was like, no, right? I was like, absolutely not. But after years of the masking, finally I was like, okay, I'll do it if you build a wall between us and the attendees, because we don't want people yanking on a cable or throwing a USB drive somewhere or whatever. Like, we just don't need those kind of distractions. And they said, fine, we'll do it. And that's how they ended up with this. They agreed to everything. I was like, we're still gonna have the lights low. We're still gonna have hacker movies playing. We're still gonna have music on. We're still gonna be sleeping on the floor, all of those things. And the only thing that they were like, was the sleeping on the floor. So they built us a little room off to the side. You can see the door of it right there. And that's just got a few couches in it. So we run really long hours in the knock. And sometimes there have been, and it hasn't happened in a couple of years, knock on wood. It's approaching fast. I will be in Vegas on the 29th, so a few weeks from now to set up. But we'd work 36 hours straight, right? Because the network has to be up. It has to be up for the training class to start on Saturday morning because people have paid $5,000 a piece, and there are thousands of people who are expecting to start. And if the network's not running, those thousands of people who paid $5,000 a piece are livid, and the calls never stop coming, right? So we'll sleep in there as well. But we don't do it with a Cisco 2600 router anymore, and we don't do it with a couple of Linksys switches. Now we have partners that come in and help us. So probably at this point, it's gotta be like 8 years ago or 9 years ago. I was talking to Bart Stumper, who is my partner in crime on the knock, and I just said, man, this doesn't scale. Like, we're dying. Like, we rolled our own on everything. Everything was open source hardware, right? So we had PF running on SoCRIS boxes we deployed to classrooms. We had scripts that were running just to tell us if something was like alive in the network somewhere, and it didn't scale. And we were taping down cables in every room. It was brutal. And so I was like, what if we go down to the expo hall and we just say to them, like, hey, we're the guys from the knock. Would you be interested in letting us use your equipment? And if you do, we'll put your logo in the program and we'll say you provide the access points for Black Hat, or you provide, the core infrastructure for it, or mobile device management, or whatever the thing is that we needed. And he's like, yeah, let's go see. So we went down to the expo floor. We walked up to the first vendor that we were interested in working with, and we said, hi, we're the guys from the knock. Here's what we'd like to do. And they were like, yes. Like, when? Now? Like, do you need stuff now? Because I'll get stuff. And we're like, wait, what? And we're like, no, like next year. And they're like, do you need people too? We'll send our best people so our stuff looks really good. And we're like, wait, we're getting people and stuff? And I looked at Bart and I was like, let's go shopping, right? And we just walked around the expo floor going like, hey, we're the guys from the knock, want to give us free shit? And they were like, hell yeah, we want to give you free shit. And we're like, give it to us. Give us free shit. And they were like, here it is. And so we get pallets of gear that are delivered to us, licenses worth millions of dollars, stuff that comes in, they're just like, take it, take it. So these are partners. They don't pay. They don't sponsor their way into the Black Hat knock. They are what we believe are the best solutions for the things that we're trying to do. If you had an unlimited budget and you were saying, I want to build the best SOC/knock that I can possibly build, these are the logos that you would work with. Like, that is our opinion, and we have battle tested the shit out of that. Like, when we put other vendors in place, they tip over. And we've been working with this crew here for years now, and so far it's been serving us really well. It doesn't guarantee them to be in there every year. Every year they earn their spot. And if for some reason the network throws something at it that just knocks it offline, we can't use that gear again. We have to find a replacement. And so there are times when we'll bring in other partners. They get a little bit of time, and then we kick them to the curb because we're like, that's not going to work for us. We're not going to use you. Sorry. We will test them. What we do is a cycle of, if we're going to put something new in place or we're going to test something new out, we bring them to the London show in December. We see how it stood up. We tweak things for the Asia show, which normally takes place in like April. make sure everything's good there, and then we roll it out at the US for the big guns, right? For everything that you guys throw at it when you show up there. Hacker Summer Camp is interesting. The venue, right? So MGM owns Mandalay Bay. We have two calls, the start of the day, the end of the day, with all of the different security teams from all over the Strip. So even though they're competitors the rest of the year, when we all descend on Vegas later this summer, they become really close. And they all start sharing, here's what I saw, this is what's happening, blah, 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 right? So yeah, it's quite the challenge. This is what we brought this past year for the US show. So for 2024, this is awkward. So you see this one has logos on here. So we're not using NetWitness this year. I actually used to work for NetWitness. They just didn't innovate. Like their stuff, it was like the same dashboards for like years going on. Detections weren't where they needed to be, that kind of stuff. And we were like, sorry, we got to part ways. We tell people that we're using the best stuff, and if it's not the best, our commitment when we put that logo up there is that you are the best solution for what you do, and you're just not. So that's brutal, but whatever. And then we also, during COVID, we started streaming things on Twitch. So if you want to watch what we're doing in the knock at any show, anytime there's a Black Hat show going on, you can see us in there setting up throughout the day. We'll talk to people in the chat. We like this quote here. It says, "What are they doing in that room?" And then someone says, "Their best." And they were like, "Their best of what?" Cyber. I love it. It's such a good little exchange there in the chat. So you can watch it there. I mentioned I was a VP at the company I'm at now, which means I love a dashboard. Give me colorful dashboards. Tell me what I need to know. Give me a stoplight. That's great. I used to be cool. I used to do cool shit. Anyway. So we have a lot of different dashboards that tell us stuff. The one that you see that's moving over there, that's called OIP. What OIP is, it's an open source project that some students at Utah State University put together, and it's just the most active hosts on the network. Green is TCP, red is UDP, ICMP is white, and if like somebody's scanning, you see ICMP, it looks like fireworks. Like you see it gets thicker, that just means that there's more traffic being sent, so we'll see a whole bunch of traffic start going between a couple of hosts, and we'll be like, what is that? We'll turn to Corelight and say, hey, IP address this to this, can you take a look at that and see what that activity is, right? If it looks like an outlier or something anomalous. So even though it is pew, 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 it's actually useful, So yeah, lots of pretty dashboards. Don't need to talk about it. They are getting shinier. I mean, look at that. So shiny. It looks very cool. But I left these in here for things like this. So this is the amount of encrypted versus unencrypted traffic on the Black Hat network. So about 74% of the traffic is encrypted, 26% not. We started tracking that a little over a decade ago, and it was at like 50%. And then year over year, it would go up about 5%, and then it's settled in now where it's at 75 to 80, and that's true in both the US and Europe. The only one that's different is Asia, who even when we started tracking the stats 10 years ago, they were at 90%. And I talked to some locals there, and I was like, why? 90? You guys can encrypt everything. Like, what's up with that? And a guy was like, oh, that's because like if you say something bad about your government, you're fine, but if we do, we disappear. And I was like, that shit got dark. That's the realest answer I've ever heard, but okay. So Asia seems to still hover in about the 90% range. And I mentioned that we let everything fly, right? We have to go through and look for the things that are actually bad, and we do that through threat hunting. Most of the people that you saw on that screen that said the team are threat hunters from the different partners that we have, as well as a group of folks that I bring in myself who are basically my friends. We bring in 16 of our closest friends who take their PTO to come and help us run the network because they're sadists. But while we're looking through all that traffic, what you see here is in the upper left, it says that throughout the course of the show, so this is about on noon on the Thursday of the show, so the last day of the show is when we captured this screenshot, we saw 2.65 million threats that were alerted on, right? 2.65 million for about a week's worth of traffic. We blocked 241. right? 2.65 million, we blocked 241. So that's our challenge, is in a sea of 2.65 million to find the 241 and hope there wasn't 242, right? So that's the challenge. But it's a hell of a challenge. It's really fun to do. I left this one in here from last year as well. These are just the top AI applications. So you'll see ChatGPT is actually number 2 to one called Notion AI, but Notion does this thing where like basically you can set your phone out, turn on the app, and it will take notes while you're in a meeting. And so people were using that in training classes and sessions. They just leave their phone out and it was doing like transcribing notes for them, which is kind of cool. And then the top social apps, for some reason, Facebook was number 1. And I was like, you bunch of boomers. Like everybody's out there being like, hi, Grandma, I'm over here to the Black Hat having a good old time. Had me a cold sarsaparilla earlier today. Like, I'm like, what in the hell? But, you know, I don't know. It's something. So I mostly talked about this, so I'll run through it really fast. But our goals throughout the course of the show have evolved. When we started out, again, the network was down 50% of the time, so the real goal was stability. It wasn't security. It was just, can we keep this freaking network up long enough to have to worry about securing it? So it was stability. Then it moved to security, and then we were like, we've got to segment these idiots from one another, right? There was no segmentation up to that point. It was just flat. Everybody could see everyone, which meant that like the red team class could see the blue team class, and they were like, get them, right? Like literally, they would learn some new shit, and they'd be like, attack the class next door, a bunch of policy nerds, right? Like it was bedlam. And so we were like, okay, host isolation, put everybody on different VLAN. Like we gotta separate these for their own safety, separate them from one another. Then we started doing malware sandboxing with Cisco's Threat Grid, which they now call something else. What's what? Still Threat Grid apparently, right? So Cisco Threat Grid. Basically, if any type of executable, a DLL, PDFs, whatever, anything that could have malware in it, we throw it into Threat Grid, we'd open it up, we'd play with it, see what it would do, right? And that led to some really interesting things. I'll give you a quick story. At one point, I'm watching the screen and I'm seeing all the different, because as you're looking at Threat Grid, you can see it popping up, all the different instances, and I see some files go by that looked sensitive, and I was like, that's weird, what was that? Pull that one back for me, tell me what that is. And they pull it up, and it's like, Wells Fargo, right? And I was like, huh. And I go, all right, show me all traffic from that user in the last hour, right? And they come back, they pull out all the files, we start going through them, and all in the clear were highly sensitive financial documents, right? So I'm like, oh, okay. And now I don't have the bandwidth to go from class to class telling everybody, hey, you're sending clear text credentials, or you're sending clear text files, or your machine is beaconing out to known command and control servers, or it looks like you're doing crypto mining on your laptop. Do you know that? I don't have the bandwidth to do it like I used to be able to do. I used to go to every class. But this was egregious enough that I was like, fine, I'm going to go to the class. I walk down there, and I'm like, can I speak to so-and-so? Because I knew his name, because I read all his shit. So I was like, can I speak to so-and-so? And they're like, yeah, and they grab him, and I come back to the back of the class because I'm not going to pants him in front of everybody. I was like, can you come back here so I can talk to you? And I was like, hey, man, you're sending a lot of really sensitive files out across the network in the clear. And he was like, no, I'm not, which is always what happens. I've been in cybersecurity for 15 years. I know what I'm doing. And you're like, this is how much is left on your mortgage. And he was like, fuck. Like he's like, oh my gosh, no. He was like, hold on, I'll show you. And he goes and gets his laptop, and he comes back, and he's pointing at the system tray, and he's like, look at the green lock, you know? And I'm like, that's great, man. This is what's left on your mortgage. I don't know what to tell you. You think you're connected, but you're not. And in the postmortem, it turns out he just had split tunneling misconfigured, and he was sending shit out. But I said, why would you do this? Why would you send all of these documents from Black Hat to anywhere? You're on the Black Hat wireless network. And he was like, my kid's going to university in the fall, and I had to get the stuff in for financial aid. And I was like, okay, so that also means that the university's file server that you're sending them, posting to, is not using TLS, right? So we're like, great. Now I have to contact you, and that's what we do. We will reach out to the university, and we're like, hey, we're the guys, we do this, blah, blah, blah. By the way, this isn't secure. You have all these people sending us stuff. And we follow up with them to try to make things better, because we're not just idiots. We are most of the time, but we do care about security. So that's what happened there. That's always what happens though. We're like, hey, this is going on in your machine, and they go, no, it's not. I know what I'm doing. And then you're like, PCAPs, don't lie, right? And you show them, and they're like, oh no. So we did malware sandboxing. We did identity access management. That's because we failed. What happened there was we had one of the partners who, with the best intentions, thought they might have a vulnerability on their access points, and so not their access points, their switches. So they were like, we're going to push a firmware update to all of these switches. And they did it at like midnight, and they didn't talk to me, and they didn't talk to Bart. And we came in the next day for trainings to start, and we were hard down. And we were down for 90 minutes, which is the longest outage we've ever had at Black Hat, and I hate that it happened. But it made me realize, like, okay, even if people are doing things with the best intentions, we need control over like who's committing changes, who's doing what, and if they are, who did it and at what time and where and all whatever. So we're like, well, here's a piece of the puzzle we haven't been using that we need to, and so we started doing that about 10 years ago. Once we had all that stuff locked in on the network endpoint, obviously you're not going to install stuff on your machines, but we have iPads for registration, laptops that are the corporate laptops, all the different scanners they use on the expo floor to scan your badges with, every one of those iPhones. Like we use Cisco for mobile device management for that. And so we're looking at endpoint telemetry as well, because if something goes on the reg server, which to us are the keys to the kingdom, right? Like that reg server gets attacked like you wouldn't believe. The moment it comes online, it is under attack. And so, we're watching to make sure that nothing bad actually happens. And then once we have endpoint taken care of, we were like, with the scale of the show, we've got to automate these things. I can't walk to every classroom, and we've got a little bit more. Just a few more slides. I'm sorry. I talk a lot. Sorry. If it sucks, you can leave. You don't have to feel bad. You can go back there. They got booze. So what we started doing with automation, put a SOAR system in place. That's it. That's them telling me I got to go. So boom, microphone dies. So for investigations, it allowed us to collect everything from all the different partners and put it under one ticket. But also what it allowed us to do is send out messages like this, where if we see clear text account creds, confirmed malware, or crypto mining, we will send them essentially a captive portal that says, if you are receiving this automatically generated message because the Black Hat NOC has detected malware coming from this machine. If this traffic is legitimate, please disregard this message. If this traffic is unintentional and you have concerns about the detected behavior, please feel free to email the Black Hat NOC at knock@blackhat.com to discuss with one of our analysts. And people will come to the NOC and they'll be like, I got this message, and we'll show them the logs, we'll show them the PCAPs, we'll say, here's what's looking, it looks like when you got on the network, you immediately started beaking out to known C2, like, are you supposed to be doing that? And they're like, no, right? And so but we can give them the data to go back to their companies and do something about it. So often people think like, oh, I'm gonna go to Black Hat and get hacked, but the reality is we have about 60 really, really intelligent security folks and threat hunters who are in there looking for stuff. So if you hook up to the network and you don't get that notification, maybe you're all right. So things that we're also doing are, using AIs and the machine learnings, right? So we're just trying to adapt and stay ahead of things. So that's really difficult to read, but essentially what you're looking at is we've taken each VLAN or each classroom, and we're like, when we look at the traffic that's coming out there, what type of exploit is being sent out, or what type of malicious traffic is going out from that classroom or on that VLAN, and then we plot it on a graph. And we say, oh, okay, it looks like of the 50 people in that class, 40 of them all launched the same exploit, or 40 of them all contacted the same server, or 40 of them all sent this type of malicious traffic to whatever. So that's likely a lab, or that's likely something that should be in that class. But then we'll be like, boop, there'll be a little guy that pops up over on the corner, and we're like, of 50 people in that class, one person just tried to use this exploit on a server that no one else touched, right? So we're like, that's an outlier. The hunters start looking at that, and that's how we find the bad within the bad, is it helps us zero in on those outliers and start to look for things that actually matter. It helps us do things like, even in this case, the little box you're looking at there was the registration Wi-Fi, and there was an anomaly on it where just a service that we needed to use was missing, and it just let us know, like, for some reason that laptop's not running what it should be. We also do things like this. This is a project that Dark Matter, if anybody of you are familiar with Dark Matter, Mike Spicer, he's an evil genius. Actually, he's just the sweetest man in the world. But he did the Wi-Fi cactus, if you're familiar with the Wi-Fi cactus. So Dark Matter created what he calls precogs, which are basically, they're just Raspberry Pis that he put a bunch of sensors on, and he has them calling out to different services and doing a bunch of different things, and then feeding it back into Cisco's Thousand Eyes. So what he's doing is proactively looking for latency or problems in the network, and then letting us know, like, hey, this part of the network is starting to get congested, or we're starting to see something fail, so that we can handle it before it becomes a problem. So when we're looking at this dashboard that we've got set up in Thousand Eyes here, we want it to be all green. And if we start to see it go yellow or orange, wherever, we know, like, okay, something's going on in the network, we take a look at it, we go, oh, it's really congested, it's this classroom, let's go deploy another access point, or let's go put some more resources, turn up, the amount of bandwidth in that portion of the network, whatever it is, so that everybody has a good experience. So what do we see on the network? This kind of garbage. Every single show, we see VPNs misconfigured, LDAP to the internet, emails in the clear. Emails in the clear today, right? That you have to actively try to make email secure. Now, you have to go in and turn shit off in order to make email insecure at this point, and people do it. We see really, really complex passwords sent in the clear, like, great. And we see a lot of porn, gross. Company paid for you to be there, what are you doing? You're in the back of the class, leave it alone. Yeah, use your cell phone, yeah, animal. Every once in a while, we do fall flat on our face, and I think it's only fair to talk about those things. I mentioned before why we used identity and access management. So we had a partner who we used for that, and then we don't use them anymore, and we were in between figuring out who are we going to use for it, and we had to go to a show, and we're like, you know what, what could go wrong? One of the guys at Palo Alto had made a change to configuration on the firewall. They're not supposed to commit anything without talking to Bart or myself, and he knew that, and so he was like, I'm gonna make this change, and I'll wait till lunch. It shouldn't affect anything, but I'll wait until lunch, so if it does, it's not a problem, and we can just roll it back. And then so he puts it in, but he doesn't commit, right? So he doesn't commit that config file, but it stays there, right? Like, it's just chilling, waiting. Somebody else from Palo Alto goes in and says, oh, I'm going to make a change to the config file. It's very minor. It's not going to cause any problems. Not an issue whatsoever. Nobody's going to know. They're going to know. And here's why. He commits it. It commits his change. And who else's change? You bet your ass, the guy before him. And it brought the network down. And the network was down for a total of probably about 8 minutes. But that's what happens when you let anybody make changes to your configs, right? So we did have a minor outage because of that. This is what the attacks look like on the registration server. So this is just a snapshot of some of the things that we get hit with. I know you can't read that really, but it is a dumpster fire. Everything that can possibly be thrown at that thing is getting thrown at it. And I know attribution is hard, but from the level of somebody in the hallway messing around to what we believe was a Russian nation-state attacker trying to get access to the database for the registration system. And it's like, well, why would you want that? Well, do you want 25,000 of the top security people's information? Yeah, you probably do if that's your bag, right? This one here, in this case, is it? Is it? Should I just hold it? Sorry, it's muscle memory at this point. Yeah, So here we have, what we have is applications on phone. In this case, this is a VPN. So everybody's like, use a VPN, and you should use a VPN, but you should also use one that isn't some random piece of shit you got for free. Maybe take the time to research what you're using and see what it does. In this case, the VPN was fine. It did what it was supposed to do, right? And the traffic was encrypted, and that's great. But what it also did was it did a keep alive every minute that was just calling out to a server from this mobile device, and every time it did it, it sent the latitude and longitude of the user of that mobile device in that ping, like keep alive. And so we took this and we were like one of the guys in the knock was like, I'm writing a script, and he just pulled out of the traffic the latitude, longitude, and we could watch this guy move throughout the conference. We could just watch him moving around, and I'm like, that's horrifying. But know what your applications are doing. Don't assume that they're secure. If you have things on your phone that you're worried about, fire up Wireshark, get on your wireless at home, start looking at stuff, open up the app, see what it does. In this case, this was one of our Singapore shows. We saw a whole lot of what we would consider malicious traffic. Like this was to a public websites. SQL injection, WordPress attacks, Log4j exploit attempts, enumeration, CRO manipulation, lots of scanning to various public sites, restaurant chains, and payment providers, right? So this is all going on in the network, coming from one device and going out at stuff on the internet. And that happens a lot. People come to Black Hat, they learn new things, they get excited, and they go, I gotta do this, I gotta throw it at something. In one case, I had to go down to a classroom and be like, hey, stop attacking the police precinct from your hometown. Like, why? Why? Like, and there's just a web hacking class, and the guy was like, I learned a new thing. And it's like, great, man. Want to go to jail? Like, but that was literally, I'm like, someone's attacking a police department. And sure enough, it was just somebody in a classroom who was like, I got a new tool. Yeah, so we saw all this stuff, and it's going out to public things, and that happens at every show. Probably 3 to 5 times throughout a show, I have to go to a classroom and say, and sometimes I just get annoyed. I'm like, here we go again. And I'll just open the door, and I'll be like, doing things at Black Hat that are illegal are still illegal. And I close the door, and it stops, right? So it's like, just because you're here doesn't mean, and they think like, well, it's probably masked by all the stuff. Nobody's going to know. And they do learn things, and they start firing it at the whole damn internet. But in this case, this person was going off. And so we knew, based on where the traffic was coming from and the access point they were associated with, generally what area they were in. So we went looking for them. And we're like, there shouldn't be anybody in that area right now because those classes don't start until tomorrow. And we go look, and there's a guy sitting on a bench just with his laptop. And we're like, that's the guy. Like, that's got to be the guy. And so we sent him this. And it just says, Dear Black Hat attendee, doing illegal activities at Black Hat is still illegal. Please discontinue attempting to execute vulnerabilities on live internet-facing websites. This is a violation of the Black Hat Code of Conduct. Love the knock. P.S. If it continues, we will come find you. The joke is that we already found them. and he was like, boop! And then, like, as we're watching, like, there's guys in the knock who are like, okay, we're going to send it now. We're sending it now. Okay, we send it now. And he's running away, right? Like, so it usually stops immediately, and it is fun. It is interactive. And like I said, we see things that look illegal fairly frequently. In this case, this was somebody who, I mentioned anomalies, so you can see some of the other people in the class and the types of exploits that they were using. And then there's old Purple over here, and he's throwing everything and the kitchen sink at one particular company that's just public-facing. We're like, this is not normal. This isn't part of the class. Let's take a look. We look at all his traffic. He's hammering away on this company. And it's egregious enough that, again, I decide I'll go down there. So I walk down to the classroom. They got a little stage at the front. I jump up. I'm like, hi, I'm Grifter from the Black Hat Knock. Doing illegal things at Black Hat is still illegal. Whoever it is who's attacking public infrastructure, can you please stop that now? And this is the only time this has ever happened. A guy went, that's me. And I was like, well, this will be interesting, right? And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, that's me. I'm doing a pen test for a company, and I didn't get to finish it before I came. So I'm done with my lab, and in between the labs, I'm just doing whatever. And I'm like, just so I'm clear on this, you are doing a pen test on an open Wi-Fi network to one of your paying customers at Black Hat, which is known for having an incredibly hostile network. And he was like, yeah, but it's fine. I mean, I can show you that I have permission to do it. And I was like, well, you're gonna stop, because one, it's unethical. Also, what company do you work for? So I never hire them. Like, and he was like, no, it's fine. It's totally fine. And I said, look, man, we normally don't block stuff here, but if you continue, we'll just block you off the network. And he was like, fine. You know, I'm sure he went back to his hotel room and then on the hotel network kept doing his pen test. But we were like, seriously, the stuff that you see. And then finally, in this case, this was at the Singapore show. We saw, again, what looked like traffic to a known command and control server. We're like, okay, this is something that we need to take a look at. It was egregious enough that we could see that it was active exfiltration going on at the time. And so I'm like, all right, well, where is it? And we try to do identification where we can. So I'm just like, give me information, all the information about that device, anything you can. And so we had like a partial host name. I was like, that looks like part of a last name. I went to registration. I said, can you give me every last name that has these characters in it? And they said, sure. And there were 3 people who came up, and then one of them said speaker. And I was like, oh, thank God. I was like, all right, it's just probably somebody doing a demo, blah, blah, blah. Let's see, when is this guy, when's this guy speaking? And it's like, oh, now. Okay, so great. He's up on stage, he's doing his demo, and then I look at the talk title, and I'm like, that's not what this is about. I was like, oh my gosh. So I go, all right, well, go with Pope, my buddy Pope. We walk down to the session that he's in, and we're waiting off to the side of the stage. The guy gets done speaking. He comes off the stage, and we're like, hey, man, we're seeing active exfiltration going from your laptop right now. Is that something that you're aware is happening? Is that? And he's like, no. And we're like, okay, well, here's what we're seeing, da-da-da-da-da. Post-mortem on that, it was a malicious Chrome extension. He was actually compromised, and it was just siphoning data off of his laptop. The point of that story is that this is somebody who was on stage at Black Hat. This is a Black Hat speaker, which often people say like, oh, a DEF CON speaker, a Black Hat speaker, a SecKC speaker, oh my gosh. Those people must know what they're talking about. And here's the thing, he does know what he's talking about, right? But it doesn't matter that you know what you're talking about. It doesn't matter that you have content that was good enough to get past a review board of what's supposed to be some of the smartest people that are in the industry to put your research up on stage. Sometimes we all click the link. Sometimes we open the file. Like, it can happen to any of us. So if it happens to you or me or whoever, if it happens to a Black Hat speaker and they're on stage live doing it, it can be any of us. So when you hear that somebody's been breached, when you hear that somebody clicked the link, give them some grace. It can happen to all of us. Thanks.